Hey guys, so normally this is when we would send down an Ask Me Anything with myself and Saagar, but Saagar is not back yet. So in lieu of that, we thought we would do an Ask Kyle Anything, except I'm the only one who gets to ask him anything. So hopefully I channel the kind of questions that you would want to ask the one and only Kyle Kulinski. So first, real softball, how did you feel about the week? How was the experience for you?
It was wonderful. So, I mean, between doing my show and doing Breaking Points, and now we're going to do Krystal, Kyle, and Friends shortly too, but all of it together, it was definitely a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and you know, I'm fortunate, I'm very lucky to be able to do something that I love for a living, and so I feel like I'm very privileged in that sense, so I'm in no position to blame, even if I felt a little overloaded this week. But yeah, it was great. I watched back some of the stuff that we did, like I've been saying on the show. I do feel I'm always in secular talk mode, the Kyle Kulinski show, which is my show, and so I'm always a little maybe too animated and passionate and cursing too much. And I did notice the same thing that others notice, which is that doesn't transfer into Breaking Points. Like the whole point of Breaking Points is to be outsider truth tellers, but also do it with the look of professionalism.
Like a little bit of a mainstream veneer.
That's right. And so I don't have the ability to tap into the mainstream veneer, but when I tried really, really hard, I was able to reduce my cursing on the second show. And then by the third show, I was actually, I think, able to eliminate it. I don't think I cursed at all in the third show.
I think you're right.
Which is like a record for me. So yeah, it was wonderful. I enjoyed every part of it, and I'd be more than happy to do it again. And
what did you feel like format-wise? So the cursing was one thing that was different, but like what else did you feel like was really different between your show and the mindset you get into there versus Breaking Points?
So it's not that much different. It's really not. The only big difference, like I said, is the professionalism. You know, reel it in a little bit. Don't go too over the top like I normally do. But outside of that, you know, I used to be with the Young Turks Network. And when I had done their show, the way in which they do the show by like cutting to a number of graphics and cutting to more videos, like there are more graphics and videos for your show than there is for my show. Usually for my show, there's like one video per story or one graphic per story, or at most like two. And the rest of it is just me talking a little bit more like a radio show or something. You know what I mean? So there's a few more graphics. But I was able to sort of tap into that prior experience I had back when I was with the Young Turks. And so it's very similar to that. It's just you have to think a little bit more about a few more things to cut to. But really, you know, it's not all that different. It really isn't. It's like the difference between, you know, whatever, driving a scooter and driving a motorcycle. You know, like it's all very, very similar.
Gotcha. So for people who don't know you that well, how would you describe your politics and what are the origins of your politics?
I mean, I could answer that question in 2 minutes or like 4 hours, but I would describe, there's a number of ways I'd describe my politics. Probably the label I use most these days is populist left. And that's one of the reasons why you and I get along so well, is that you're one of like 2 people total who describes themselves as populist left.
We're all here at this table.
Yeah, yes. So I'm more than, like I'm when it comes to foreign policy and when it comes to economics, I'm solidly left. And I generally just have like no interest in the culture war. And I actively critique both sides of the culture war. So I'd say that. Now I've taken some political compass tests. On some of them, I come out what's called a left libertarian, which means libertarian on social issues. So like live and let live on social issues, but on economics left. I've described myself in the past as a social democrat. I love the Scandinavian style systems. I think they're wonderful with free healthcare and free college and higher wages and unionization. And then I took one test that said I'm a libertarian socialist. So I don't know if I would embrace a label like that, but at least according to one, I think it's called the Left Values Political Test, I got libertarian socialist. So, you know, like I said, the label I embrace the most is populist left. That's probably the closest to where I am.
Yeah, and I know Chomsky was a big intellectual influence for you.
Yes.
What about personal experiences that you think helped shape and form your politics?
So that's a great question. When I first got interested in politics, it was very weird. I came to it through like a number of different paths at once. I sort of got interested in like atheism and went through like the teenage hardcore atheist phase where I read like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. And so that was one way I came to it. I also started reading Chomsky books at about the same time when I was pretty young. Then I got into 9/11 conspiracies. At the same time, I would watch Bill O'Reilly's show regularly. So I just getting bombarded with politics. And
but
then
you
also,
didn't really like Bill O'Reilly. You just
No, I despise him.
You thought his style was
I thought
interesting.
in terms of his delivery,
Yeah.
he was number one. I mean, there's a reason why he was the number one show, but he's a total fucking moron.
I mean, we borrowed, and I've told you this before, we borrowed some of his, like, he always did the talking points memo
Right,
with
yeah.
the bullets. And so that was, and I feel like that was sort of borrowed from sports shows.
Right.
I mean, everything ultimately ends up being derivative, but it is a really good format, and that's where the idea for the radars and stuff came from too, in part.
Yes, for sure. And I also, Tom Hartman, back when he was on Air America Radio, he's somebody
Tom's great.
who I love. We should have him on our show
Yeah,
soon
we've been
because
wanting to do
he's
that.
wonderful. But he was a big influence on me. And then embarrassing to admit a lot of this stuff now, but when I was younger, it was like there was a phase where it was Bill Maher. Now I sort of despise him.
Yeah, but he's gotten worse, right?
I definitely think he's gotten worse.
I mean,
for
he
sure, over
backed
the
Bernie
years.
in
And then he went from Bernie to Klobuchar.
Amy Klobuchar.
I mean, come on, man. It's just so I'm embarrassed that was ever the case.
yeah, but that's his fault. He left. You didn't leave him. He left you.
Yeah, no, correct. So yeah, there's a bunch of different ways that I came to politics. And in terms of personal experience, I mean, this isn't exactly right because my politics had already been formed by this point, but it did help sort of solidify it as well. My father passed away from lung cancer, and he went to a chiropractor to get his back worked on because his back was really hurting. And the chiropractor would, do the whole back cracking thing and tell him, come back next week, man, we're gonna work that kink out, it's gonna be all good. And that happened time after time after time. And then eventually one day he was in so much pain, he had to go to the emergency room. He went to the emergency room, they ran some tests, and they immediately found out that back pain he had was because he had lung cancer that metastasized to his spine. Wow. And so he was in, tremendous pain. He only lived like a couple weeks or a month longer after he was put to the hospital. But, my takeaway from that, there were a few takeaways from that. Number one is that chiropractor belongs in prison because what he was doing was fleecing my dad for more money, and he wasn't honest enough to say, you're in a lot of pain. I don't think this is going to be fixed by me cracking your back and pretending it's medicine. This is not medicine. So I sort of got a hatred for alternative medicine as a result of that, understandably so. And by the way, if you go to chiropractors understanding they're just glorified back crackers, by all means, go right ahead. You could do that. I'm not against you doing that. I just want people to understand what they are, because there's some people who argue chiropractors believe in this theory called subluxation theory, which means the reason you get any illness at all is because your spine is not in alignment and it's squiggly. And so they want to make that spine straight and crack your back all the time. And they claim that'll cure almost all illnesses. And so that's just bullshit. That's pseudoscience. It's not real. It's junk science. And so, that was one thing I took away from that. And the other thing I took away from that is, at the time, my father financially wasn't doing all that well. And he didn't go to a real doctor. My suspicion is because he didn't have health insurance. He was probably afraid of how much it was going to cost. Yeah. And so I don't know for sure, but it is possible that if he was able to go to a doctor and didn't cost him an arm and a leg, he may have gone to the doctor earlier, and then he may have gotten it diagnosed earlier, and then maybe he'd be alive today. There's a lot of speculation in there. I'm not saying it's definitive, but it's enough to really make me realize, man, we really need a universal healthcare system. It's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and you've been consistent, passionate advocate for that, certainly, since you've been doing Secular Talk. What is the narrative in Washington or Beltway media right now that irritates you the most?
Ooh, that's a tough one. The narrative that irritates me the most. I don't know which one irritates me the most. I have to think about that for like weeks. But one of the ones that everybody accepts that drives me up a wall, and this is the media, and this is, the leadership of both parties and the majority of politicians in both parties, probably all the Republicans except maybe one or two, and like 90% of the Democrats. It's this idea that when it comes to foreign policy, we are the world police, and the reason we're in this position is because we believe in freedom, we believe in liberty, we believe in democracy, we believe in human rights, and that's why we are in our rightful place as the world's sole superpower. That's always irritated me, because if you know anything about history, that's just factually wrong. We oftentimes back brutal puppet dictators who serve our corporate interests. It's honestly a laughable notion that we do what we do overseas, either for human rights reasons or any of the other nonsense that they feed you. Fact of the matter is we act like virtually any empire ever has acted, and it has a lot to do with, well, the military-industrial complex makes a lot of people very wealthy, and corruption leads to that military-industrial complex. We have legalized bribes in this country, and it's natural resources. We're trying to get natural resources. It's trillions of dollars of mineral wealth in Afghanistan, and also geopolitics plays a big role in it. So there's this imperialism chessboard, and we want to keep China in check and Russia in check. That's another reason why we want to have these hundreds of military bases around the world. So I just want people to stop being naive. American exceptionalism, I think, is ridiculous. Another word for exceptional is supreme. So this is American supremacy. You can't simultaneously believe in egalitarianism and equality and also say we're the exceptional nation. That makes no sense. That's a massive contradiction. So that's one of the things that gets under my skin. I just wish we would stop all the wars and invest in our people here at home and rebuild our infrastructure and give people jobs and give people health care. And instead, we're having a conversation about how long we should stay in Kandahar. By the way, the answer was 20 years.
Yeah. I'll ask you one of the questions we get asked a lot, which is, what are the news sources or like the media that you consume that informs your views?
So at this point, 95% of my show prep is done on Twitter. So it's just, I follow every news organization you can think of. I follow every political commentator you can think of. It's mostly people who I find trustworthy, and most of them happen to be left-leaning. Mm-hmm. So those are the people I follow. There are some that lean right and some, centrists that I rely on. But I have this whole menu, this whole media diet, and I scroll through my Twitter feed on a daily basis, and whatever I find that's interesting, actually what I've been doing recently is I'll DM it to you, and then at the end of the day, I'll go back in and go through, all of our DMs and pick the stories that I want for my show. And I know you have a very similar process as well, and that's one of the things you do for Breaking Points.
Yeah, that is exactly right. Who do you think really killed JFK?
So there was even a CNN article years ago that I thought was fascinating, because in the article, this person looked into it for them, and the person basically said, I was able to debunk all of the conspiracies and be convinced against all of the conspiracies except one. And the one that this person felt like they couldn't debunk was the CIA. So Alan Dulles, the CIA, it's the most likely candidate. Having said that, do I think Lee Harvey Oswald was involved in some way? Of course, I think he was involved. I don't know, I don't know how, why, the details of it, but I'm more agnostic than one would think. I just say I don't really know, because do I find it crazy that the mafia was involved? No, I don't. What's the name of the guy who killed Lee Harvey Oswald? Whatever that guy's name, Jack Ruby. He had connections to the mafia. So it could have been the mafia, could have had something to do with the Cold War, the Russian government, the Cuban government, the CIA, somebody, I don't know. It could be a million things, but probably the most likely answer is the CIA.
Yeah. Well, the mafia was very invested in Cuba because they were making lots of money there.
That's right.
There was a connect there. Last question for you. You co-founded the Justice Democrats. You've been critical of the squad, and I think of what's been a thoughtful way. You're not saying oh, they're totally corrupt and they're terrible people, et cetera. You're just saying, look, we sent you there to challenge power, and you're not really doing that. Do you feel any differently in that critique after seeing Cori Bush's very effective protest against the Democratic establishment that got the eviction moratorium extended?
I do. So listen, I'm big on case-by-case guy. One thing I really dislike is people who argue from a narrative and then always go back to that narrative even if the evidence contradicts their narrative.
Right.
That really pisses me off.
To still fit the narrative.
Yes, because it's you're just being sloppy, and it's annoying. If you're going to be honest and look at the situation objectively and give the empirical facts, you have to call balls and strikes, and I like to call balls and strikes. And so there's nothing that would make me happier than all the Justice Democrats just proving me wrong time after time. So whenever I'm skeptical of them, whenever I'm like, hey, they're not doing the right thing, nothing would make me happier than if they turn around and do the right thing. So in the case of Cori Bush, watching her do that, I give 100% credit. And I think anybody who's not giving credit is honestly lying. Yeah. Because we saw the chain of events. It was very clear. Biden was under the impression that the Supreme Court ruled he and the CDC could not extend the eviction moratorium Cori Bush went out there and did the protest and slept on the Capitol Hill steps and got all of this media attention, which put so much pressure on Biden because it made him look stupid.
Yeah.
And so then what did Biden do? He turned around and said, yeah, technically I can't extend the eviction moratorium, but what I can do is, and he got this advice from Lawrence Tribe. He called him and Lawrence Tribe said, do a new one. But, redraft it with new language, say it's not about the original COVID strain, now it's about the Delta variant, and now it's only going to apply to the high transmission areas, which, would you look at that, is 90% of the country. And so they basically extended it, and Biden was clear. He said, look, I don't know if this is constitutional, but now I'm giving Congress time to act, and I'm giving the states time to act to get out the money that we've already allocated for this. That wouldn't have happened if not for Cori Bush putting pressure. So 100% credit to Cori Bush. And if they keep doing good things, I'll keep saying, hey, good job. But, you said, I think I'm only tough on them when I should be tough on them. And I was tough on them when it came to force the vote for Medicare for all and then for $15 minimum wage and other things because it was a good strategy, a good idea, and they didn't do it. And so, of course, I'm going to call that out. So, I just think you have to look at everything based on the evidence on a case-by-case basis and then make your mind up accordingly.
Yeah, and we're going to see what they do with this reconciliation bill and if they really
That's right, yeah.
hold the line and do not vote for the bipartisan infrastructure deal until that piece is through.
Now, I do want to say, though, because this is going to be interesting to see. So I think the $3.5 trillion is not getting through. It's not happening. And yes, the House Democrats are saying it's this or bust. I do think that what they're doing, though, that's a negotiation position. And that gets them a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And so then when they have a seat at the table, listen, I will judge the final bill on its merits, but this is where it'll get a little messy because people will have different standards.
Right.
And so my standard on that final bill is, and I've said this a number of times before publicly, it needs to be at least $2 trillion or more. So it's 3.5 now. If it goes down all the way to 2, I could still accept a $2 trillion deal, depending on the specifics.
Right.
So it's going to depend on, is it $2 trillion or more? If it's not, I'm done. I'm not going to vote for it. I would say no. But if it's $2 trillion or more, we're having a conversation, and then it would depend what they left in the bill. And if I think what's left in the bill is satisfactory, then I would support it, then I would vote for it. But again, this will get a little bit messy because people have different standards as to what's okay and what's not okay. And if people start portraying, like, let's say they get a $2.5 trillion bill, $2.5 trillion. If they pass that and the stuff in it is good, and some people say, oh, they sold out or they did the wrong thing, I'm going to be like, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. Because the whole point of taking the hardline position was to get a seat at the table to negotiate a better bill, and they will have done that if those are the facts.
Yeah.
So, a lot of this comes down to what's your subjective feelings on what the final terms can be and should be, and you're going to have disagreement on that no matter what.
Yeah, and what they've said is no climate, no deal. So meaning that there has to be,
something
but
on
even
climate.
that is subject to interpretation.
Yes.
Like what qualifies as
Yes.
sufficient in terms of the climate change provision. So we'll see how all that plays out.
Exactly.
Thank you again, sir, for
My
all of
pleasure.
your time and wonderful commentary and insights this week. I know everybody really appreciated it. Cursing aside, and I think that was a minority view that was really upset about that. But
You're very
you
nice.
adjusted beautifully. Thank you guys. As always, Saagar will be back. I think we post these on Sundays, so he'll be back tomorrow. Love you guys. See you soon.